Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are opening up a file that, and I really don't say this lightly, is probably one of the most chaotic, ethically murky, and frankly just fascinating case studies we have ever looked at on this show.
Oh, absolutely. It's wild.
Right. And, we aren't talking about some high-stakes corporate espionage thing in a glass skyscraper in Manhattan today. We are talking about the really gritty, unglamorous, and deeply desperate world of small-town law.
Yeah, it is a remarkable story. And I think what makes it so compelling for our purposes today is that it isn't just your standard legal thriller, you know? It is this perfect storm of human desperation.
Yeah, for sure.
You have professional burnout, you have a pretty severe gambling addiction, elder law manipulation, and then this very, very gray line between being what the bar would call a zealous advocate for your client.
And being a straight-up co-conspirator in a massive deception.
Exactly. The line just completely vanishes.
So to start off, let's establish our mission for this deep dive. We are unpacking the wild intersection of desperate legal ethics, secret fortunes, and the totally chaotic personal life of a man trying to secure a $20 million estate.
$20 million.
Yeah.
It's staggering when you see the context.
It really is. And the core mystery here, the thing you as a listener really need to keep in the back of your mind as we go through this source material, revolves around a woman named Eleanor Barnett, or Eddie.
Smith, yeah.
She's an 85-year-old widow. She drives this beat-up 15-year-old Lincoln, wears clothes that look like she's heading to a church bake sale, but she claims to be sitting on a literal mountain of Coca-Cola and Walmart stock.
And that contrast right there is the hook for the whole situation.
Exactly. So we need to establish the tone right away. We are looking at the tension between our protagonists, let's call it a white knight complex, like he's saving this poor old woman from a predatory lawyer, and his own incredibly self-serving motivations that are just completely fueled by debt and bad decisions.
Yeah, he wants to be the hero, but he really just needs the cash.
Right. So section 1. Let's look at the protagonist and the predicament. We are talking about Simon Latch. Now, if you were walking down the street in Braxton, Virginia, and you saw Simon, you wouldn't think twice.
Not at all. He blends right in.
He does. To the outside observer, he is just your average street lawyer. And I feel like that term, street lawyer, it gets thrown around a lot in TV shows and movies, but what does that actually look like in his day-to-day existence?
Well, according to the sources, it looks like an absolute grind. It looks like chronic exhaustion. The text describes his practice as a revolving door of misery.
Man, what a phrase.
I know, right? He's 18 years into his career at this point.
Yeah.
So those law school dreams of big corporate riches, the corner office, the skyline view, those are long, long dead. He's basically dealing with the debris of other people's lives.
Yeah, the sources actually list his typical caseload. It's bankruptcies, people losing their family homes, drunk driving charges, delinquent child support, maybe the occasional nickel and dime car wreck.
It is not glamorous in the slightest.
And the financial reality of that is just as stark, right? I mean, he bills $250 an hour. Now, to a lot of people listening, that might sound like a pretty healthy wage.
Oh, sure. $250 an hour sounds great until you do the small business math. In the legal world, once you pay for the office rent, the malpractice insurance, which is huge.
Your secretary's salary.
Exactly. Plus the research tools, the Westlaw subscriptions, the electricity. By the time that is all paid, that $250 completely evaporates. He's constantly hustling just to keep the lights on. Mm-hmm. The sources say he feels like a janitor for society's problems.
And speaking of keeping the lights on and basically living at work, we have to talk about the closet.
So the closet, yeah.
This detail from the source material really stuck with me because it just creates such a visceral, depressing image of his life right now.
Yeah.
He isn't just working long hours at his office, he's essentially living there.
It is actually worse than just living there. It's hiding there. He took this storage space above his office and renovated it. He literally calls it the closet. He knocked out some drywall himself, put in this tiny little bathroom with a really cheap prefabricated glass shower stall, and squeezed a narrow twin bed in there.
And he has to be super secretive about it, right? Because of his staff.
Completely secretive. He has to sneak up and down the back stairs, so his secretary, her name is Matilda, and she has been with him forever and basically knows everything that happens in town, so she doesn't find out.
Because if Matilda knows, the whole town knows.
Exactly. So he tells everyone he's just working really late on casework, but the reality is he is avoiding going home. He is actively avoiding his failing marriage.
That just paints such a vivid picture of isolation to me. You have this professional man, he's wearing a suit and tie during the day, projecting authority to his vulnerable clients, and then at night, he's creeping up a dark staircase to sleep in a storage room that probably smells like old legal pads and bleach.
It is a physical manifestation of his shame. He can't face his wife, he can't face his life, so he literally hides inside the walls of his work. But we have to be clear here. It isn't just the bad marriage that's pushing him into the closet. It's the money.
Right. The money is the engine driving all of this, and this is a crucial piece of the puzzle that we cannot overlook if we're going to understand his later actions. Simon has a significant gambling habit.
A very active one.
He spends almost all his free nights at a place called Chubb's Pub.
Chubb's Pub. I mean, even the name just sounds like a place where bad decisions are manufactured.
It really does. What's the vibe there?
So the sources describe it as this basement bar. It used to be a really seedy beer hall, and it's been slightly upgraded with some flat screens, but it's still fundamentally a dungeon. And the real action for Simon isn't the drinking, it's the video poker machines tucked away in the corner and the sports betting.
Specifically college hoops, right?
Yeah, March Madness is a big deal for him. But the sign of the real addiction here isn't that he's betting on the Final Four. He's betting on teams he knows absolutely nothing about.
Right. The sources mention him just sweating bullets over games involving like Cal Poly or UC Irvine.
Exactly. He even admits to himself in the text that it's all about the action. He just needs that dopamine hit. And the problem is, he's not winning. The sources indicate he's down about $7,000 at one point to a local bookie.
$7,000. I mean, for a guy who is struggling to pay his home mortgage and keep a storefront law practice afloat, that's a terrifying number to be in the hole for.
It is. And psychologically, this puts Simon in a very, very dangerous position. When you look at the ethics of it, when a professional is that financially desperate, their risk tolerance completely changes.
Because you're in survival mode.
Precisely. You start looking for Hail Mary plays. You stop seeing ethical lines as brick walls, and you start seeing them as, well, maybe just suggestions. You start rationalizing everything. You tell yourself, I'll pay it back later, or I just need one big score to reset everything.
And that exact mindset is where he is at when Eleanor Barnett walks through his door. Let's bring her into the story.
Yes, Nettie.
So Nettie enters the office, and on the surface, she is the ideal low-stress client for a guy like Simon. Older lady, very polite, wearing modest clothes. Simon is looking at her thinking, great, a simple will. I can do this in my sleep. Easy $250.
Right. He's expecting a totally standard estate plan. Maybe a small house that needs to be deeded to a relative, an old car, maybe a savings account with 10 grand in it. Standard stuff. But then she sits down and drops an absolute bombshell on him.
The backstory of her husband, Harry.
Yes. She reveals that her late husband, Harry Corsack, was what she calls a depression kid.
I really love that term. I think a lot of people listening probably had grandparents like that. The ones who saved every single piece of tinfoil, washed out the Ziploc bags, kept butter tubs.
Absolutely. It's a very real generational trauma response to extreme poverty.
Yeah.
But in Harry's case, he didn't just save tinfoil and string. He worked for Coca-Cola down in Atlanta for nearly 40 years.
And back in the day, Coke was throwing stock options at their employees.
Exactly. It was a common compensation method before executives took all the equity. So Harry acquired all these shares over decades, and because of his mindset, he never sold a single share. Not one.
And then he diversified, didn't he?
He did. Into Walmart. Back when Sam Walton was just starting to really expand the footprint, he bought stock there too. And because he was terrified of debt and hated ostentatious displays of wealth, he just let all of it sit there. He lived in a small, normal house, drove beat-up old cars, and just let the magic of compound interest do its work over half a century.
It is the absolute epitome of the millionaire next door archetype, just on steroids.
It is. So Eleanor sits there and casually claims the portfolio is worth roughly $16 million in stock, plus another $4 million in cash just sitting in various bank accounts.
$20 million. And she's sitting in Simon's dingy little office, probably wearing a coat she bought at Sears in 1995, haggling over a $250 fee for a simple will.
And that irony is definitely not lost on Simon. In fact, It's what hooks him entirely. He goes from wanting to shuffle her out of the office in 30 minutes to suddenly seeing her as the most important human being in his life.
But notice his immediate reaction in the source material. It's not just, wow, good for her, what a great American success story. It's calculation.
Oh, immediate calculation.
He starts seeing dollar signs. He starts doing the math in his head on what the legal fees would be to administer an estate of that massive size.
He does. But before he can start picking out new office furniture, he finds out he actually has competition. And this brings us to section 2 of our deep dive. The other lawyer.
Enter Wally Thackerman.
Right. Wally is the antagonist across the street. He's another small-town lawyer in Braxton. Someone Simon just absolutely loathes on a personal and professional level.
Yeah.
And it turns out Eleanor has already been to see Wally. In fact, she has already signed a will that Wally drafted for her.
So the obvious question the listener is probably asking is, why is she in Simon's office trying to get a will if she literally already has one across the street?
Because she tells Simon she doesn't sleep right because of it. Her intuition is telling her something is very wrong. She isn't a lawyer, she can't explain the dense legalese, but she knows she felt uncomfortable signing it. And when Simon finally gets his hands on a copy of that document, he finds out her intuition is 100% spot on.
Let's unpack what he finds in that document, because this is the exact moment where the story shifts from just a quirky legal consultation to a potential crime scene.
So Simon reviews the will Wally wrote. First off, it creates a trust, which, to be fair, is totally standard for an estate of this size. You want to avoid probate. But it names Wally Thackerman as the sole trustee with unlimited, unchecked power.
Meaning what, practically?
Meaning, Wally alone decides how the money is spent, how it's invested, which charities get it, everything. There's no oversight committee. That alone is highly aggressive for a lawyer to write themselves into. But the real smoking gun is a hidden clause buried deep, deep in the boilerplate legalese.
A fine print.
The absolute finest of print. Wally included a clause gifting himself $485,000 upon her death for what he called accrued services.
Nearly $500,000. Just gifted out of the estate to the lawyer who wrote the document.
Yes, it is breathtakingly unethical.
I really want to pause here and dig into this. For our listeners who aren't familiar with legal ethics, how bad is this move? Are we talking about a slap on the wrist from the local bar association, or is this go to jail bad?
It is lose your license forever and potentially face criminal fraud charges bad. Legal ethics in virtually every jurisdiction generally prohibit a lawyer from preparing an instrument like a will or a trust that gives the lawyer or a person related to the lawyer any substantial gifts from a client. The only exception is if they are actually related by blood or marriage.
And Wally is definitely not related to Nettie.
Not even a little bit. He's essentially writing himself a massive check from her bank account, effective the moment she stops breathing. It is a massive textbook conflict of interest and a deeply predatory act against an elderly woman.
It's a robbery in slow motion.
That's a great way to put it. And Simon sees this immediately. Now, his reaction is really interesting to analyze. He is outraged. Certainly. He calls Wally a slime ball in the text. He is genuinely disgusted by the lack of subtlety.
Right.
But simultaneously, he is calculating his next move. He realizes that Wally has completely overplayed his hand. Wally got greedy, and that greed gives Simon the exact leverage he needs to wedge himself into the picture.
Right, because Simon doesn't say, hey, Nettie, let's report this to the State Bar Association immediately and get the police involved. He says, I can do better for you.
Correct. He uses his own genuine outrage to manipulate Eleanor. He confirms her worst fears, that Wally is a crook, which completely validates her feelings and builds massive trust between her and Simon. He successfully positions himself as the honest, safe alternative.
But we have to ask ourselves as we read this, is he actually honest, or is he just much smarter than Wally?
That is the big question, because Simon immediately starts thinking about how he can become the trustee instead. He might not be stupid enough to write himself a direct check for $500,000, but the ongoing administrative fees for managing a $20 million foundation over 10, maybe 20 years.
Oh, that's worth far more than a one-time $500,000 payout.
Exactly. That's an annuity for the rest of his career.
That's the long game right there. Simon is looking at the annual percentage fees. He's looking at lifetime job security. He's looking at a guaranteed high-paying salary that pays him to essentially be a local philanthropist with someone else's money.
He's looking at a lifeline. You have to remember the $7,000 gambling debt to a bookie. Remember the divorce that's looming over him and the cost of maintaining 2 households. Managing this estate solves literally every single problem Simon Latch has in his life.
But there is a massive catch. And this brings us to section 3, due diligence, or maybe the lack thereof, because Simon has a huge problem right out of the gate. He doesn't actually know if the $20 million is real.
That is the verification problem. It's huge. Eleanor point blank refuses to show him any brokerage statements or bank records. She's incredibly secretive. She tells him that Harry was paranoid about prying eyes in the government, so she keeps everything completely hidden.
So she says she has $20 million, but she acts like she's living on food stamps.
Exactly. So Simon is in this agonizing position of courting a client who might be his golden ticket, a multimillionaire, or she might just be a senile old lady with severe delusions of grandeur.
So what does a street lawyer do? He goes into detective mode. He hires Spade.
Spade is such a great character in the source material. He's this shady local private investigator, strictly works in cash, insists on meeting in dark corners of local bars. Very cinematic.
Right.
Simon pays him to dig into Harry Corsak's past. And Spade's findings are actually pretty promising. He confirms Harry really existed. He confirms Harry worked for Coca-Cola during the right era. And crucially, Spade finds out there was no probate record whatsoever when Harry died.
Okay, for the layperson listening, why is the lack of a probate record so important to Simon's theory?
Because it suggests that all of Harry's assets passed directly to Eleanor via survivorship, meaning they had joint accounts or she was the named beneficiary on everything. If Harry had a massive estate solely in his name and it went through the local probate court, it would be a matter of public record.
Anyone could go look it up.
Exactly. Everyone in town would know exactly how much he was worth. The local newspapers would have probably picked it up. The fact that it didn't go through probate means the wealth could easily exist and still remain completely hidden from the public eye. It strongly supports Nettie's story of secret wealth.
But it's still just circumstantial. It's not actual proof of the $20 million. So Simon takes a bigger swing and tries to track down her wealth manager.
Right. Eleanor had briefly mentioned a guy named Buddy Brown down in Atlanta. Simon does some digging, works the phones, and eventually gets Buddy on the line. And this conversation is incredibly pivotal.
How does Buddy react?
Well, Buddy is vague. He's a high-end professional wealth manager after all, and he is certainly not going to violate client confidentiality over a cold call from some random lawyer in Virginia. But he does confirm that Eleanor is in fact his client, and he uses this very specific phrasing. He says she is well taken care of.
Well taken care of, which is absolute code for rich.
In the wealth management world, yes, absolutely. It's enough confirmation for Simon to finally go all in. And this is where we see the section of the sources I like to call the seduction of the client.
I really love this part of the narrative. And to be clear, we don't mean romantic seduction, we mean professional courting. Simon starts taking her out to lunch.
It's highly strategic. He takes her to all these non-traditional restaurants around town, Greek places, an Afghan restaurant, Korean barbecue.
Places a woman like Nettie has probably never been to in her life.
Exactly. He's expanding her horizons, he's charming her, making her feel special and cosmopolitan, but more importantly, he's isolating her. He is actively becoming her only friend. He's replacing her dull, lonely routine with himself. He wants her to rely on him for her social interaction just as much as she relies on him for her legal needs.
There's this one specific scene in the text where they talk about cremation over one of these lunches. It feels so manipulative to read. Simon is pushing for cremation to, quote, save money and the environment, even though Eleanor clearly states she wants to be buried traditionally next to her husband, Harry.
That scene is deeply, deeply revealing of Simon's character. He is actively reshaping her worldview to align with his own preferences. He describes to this 85-year-old woman the supposed horrors of embalming fluid leaking into the groundwater.
He makes it super graphic.
He makes it terrifying. And why? He's testing his influence over her. If he can convince this staunchly traditional elderly widow to abandon her long-held burial plans and go with cremation just because he suggested it, then he knows he can convince her of anything, including signing a brand new will that puts him entirely in charge of her fortune. It's grooming. There's really no other word for it in this context.
It really is grooming. And while he's playing this incredibly high-stakes psychological game with Eleanor during the day, his actual life is completely falling apart at night. Let's move to section 4, the personal collapse. Because the contrast between his smooth handling of Nettie and the wreck of his home life is just jarring.
It is. We have to look at the home front to understand his state of mind. Simon and his wife, Paula. The source material uses this phrase that just hits so hard. It describes their marriage as a sustainable coexistence of mutual dislike.
Man, that is a brutal, brutal description of a marriage.
It's heartbreaking.
Right.
They are sleeping in separate rooms. Well, as we know, he's sleeping at the office and the closet mostly. But there is a pivotal scene where they finally have the big talk. It takes place in their master bedroom.
Right.
Simon has found a hidden bottle of cheap whiskey in the bathroom, and he's just sitting there drinking it out of a plastic cup.
It's just a sad, pathetic image.
It is. And they agree right then and there to open the marriage. They realize they simply cannot afford to divorce yet. The finances are way too tight to support two households. So they agree to stay in the same house purely for the sake of the kids and the mortgage, but date other people. It's this desperate, sad arrangement born entirely out of financial paralysis.
And then they have to tell the kids about it. Buck, Danny, and Janie.
That scene is excruciating to read. Simon tries to spin it. He tries to make it sound like this very modern, mature decision. But the kids are teenagers. They see right through the corporate speak. They know their parents are completely checking out. They know the family unit is dissolving right in front of them.
And all of this domestic stress feeds right back into the gambling, doesn't it?
Absolutely. As his home life disintegrates, Simon spends more and more time down at Chubb's pub. We mentioned he's down $7,000. He's doing what gamblers call chasing losses. The worse he feels about failing his family, the more he desperately needs that bright, flashing dopamine hit from the video poker machine to numb the pain.
So, as an expert looking at this, how does this level of personal chaos affect his professional judgment when dealing with Eleanor? Because on the surface, he seems to be handling her case pretty shrewdly.
It completely compromises his judgment. When you're under that kind of intense financial and emotional pressure, your cognitive bandwidth drastically narrows. You can only focus on immediate survival. For Simon, Eleanor Barnett represents the one and only way out of a trap he built for himself.
Right.
He needs her to be rich. He needs to control that estate. He literally cannot afford to ask too many ethical questions because the alternative is personal bankruptcy, public humiliation, and ruin. His high-risk personal behavior, the sports betting, the secret apartment, it directly mirrors his high-risk professional behavior. He's basically doubling down on every aspect of his life.
So feeling the walls closing in, he decides to pull the trigger. Section 5, the new will. He actually drafts the document.
And he does it very, very carefully. He specifically doesn't want his secretary, Matilda, to see it because, as we established, she gossips. If she types up a will for a $20 million estate, the whole town of Braxton will know before lunch. So he types the entire legal document himself.
Which is a huge red flag in a functioning law office, right? If the boss is actively hiding routine paperwork from his own staff.
Massive red flag. Yeah. It screams cover up. So he drafts this new will that explicitly revokes Wally Thackerman's will. And the centerpiece of this new document is the creation of the Eleanor Barnett Foundation.
And let me guess who controls the foundation.
Simon Latch, of course.
Shocking. Just shocking.
Now, to give him a tiny bit of credit, he doesn't just gift himself a massive lump sum the way Wally did. He's much smarter and much more subtle than that. He sets it up so that he manages the money and distributes it to various charities over time. He gets paid an administrative fee for his time and his financial expertise. It's technically legal, but the underlying intent is clearly long-term self-enrichment.
It's a very comfortable sinecure. He also includes bequests for her stepsons in the draft, right?
Yes, and this is a strategic masterstroke on his part. He writes in that Clyde and Jerry Corsack, these are Harry's estranged sons from a previous marriage, they get $100,000 each.
That actually sounds pretty generous, considering Nettie said Harry specifically wanted them to have nothing.
It appears generous to a layman, but it's actually a legal trap. It's a mechanism called an interim clause, or more commonly, a no-contest clause. Basically, the will says, here is $100,000 for you, but if you contest this will in court, if you try to sue the estate to get more of the pie, you forfeit the $100,000.
Oh, wow.
It's specifically designed to buy their silence and prevent years of messy litigation. He's essentially paying them off to go away quietly.
That is devious. It's like, here's a carrot, but it's also a muzzle.
Exactly, a very expensive muzzle. And then once the document is typed, he needs witnesses to sign it. He can't use his office staff, obviously, so he grabs his neighbor, the Larsons. He actually takes them out to lunch with Eleanor to establish a baseline that she is mentally competent.
Why does he do that?
Because he wants, credible, independent witnesses who can testify later and say, yes, we had lunch with her. She was totally lucid. She knew exactly what she was doing. He is proactively building a defense for a probate trial that hasn't even happened yet.
He's playing 3D chess while everyone else is playing checkers. And then, the real kicker of this whole section, he explicitly tells Eleanor not to tell Wally that she changed her will.
This is the incredibly dangerous part. By keeping Wally in the dark, Simon creates a ticking time bomb. Wally is sitting across the street thinking he is still the executor. Wally thinks he is still getting that $500,000 payout when she dies. Simon is letting a rival lawyer walk around believing a massive lie simply because he is too cowardly to deal with the confrontation up front.
And that exact avoidance is what leads directly to violence. Let's move to Section 6, the threat. We finally get to meet the stepson, Clyde Corsack.
Clyde is the chaotic variable that Simon simply cannot control. He's a career criminal, a multi-convicted felon, basically a lifelong con man. The sources describe him looking like an aging heavy metal roadie who's seen way too many prison yards. And he is absolutely convinced his father left behind a hidden fortune.
So he comes to town and literally breaks into Eleanor's house.
He does. He just forces his way into her life. He's staying there, totally unwanted, eating all her food, physically intimidating her. He's turning her own home into a prison. And while he's snooping around her desk one day, he finds a letter from Wally Thackerman.
The letter is the spark that sets the whole thing off.
It is. Clyde realizes lawyers are involved in his stepmother's affairs. He realizes there's a will being discussed. And in a criminal's mind, lawyers getting involved means his inheritance is actively being stolen from him. So he storms right out of the house and marches over to Wally's office.
This scene in the source material is straight out of a Coen Brothers movie. Clyde Corsack bursting into this stuffy little law office.
It's pure chaos. He kicks the door open and violently demands to see the will. Wally, to his credit and correctly following the law, cites attorney-client privilege. He tells Clyde to get out.
Sure.
But Clyde doesn't care about legal privilege. He throws a cup of scalding hot coffee right in Wally's face and just starts beating him to a pulp.
And then Wally's secretary, Fran, gets involved. She pulls a gun.
Yes. Fran, this mild-mannered legal secretary, pulls a pistol out of her desk drawer and fires a warning shot straight into the ceiling plaster just to stop the beating. It's absolute terrifying mayhem. The police are called immediately. Wally has to be taken away in an ambulance.
And the irony here, the dramatic irony for us reading it, is just delicious. Wally is getting beaten to within an inch of his life over a will that is, at this point, technically invalid because Simon already had Nettie revoke it.
That is the tragedy and the dark comedy of the whole situation. Wally thinks he's bravely protecting his $500,000 golden ticket. Clyde thinks he's violently fighting for his rightful inheritance. And Simon is just sitting safely in his office across the street, holding the real legally binding will, just watching the whole thing burn down.
It's incredible. So Wally ends up hospitalized. Clyde ends up arrested and thrown in the county jail. And Simon sees a massive opportunity in the chaos.
Of course he does. A crisis is just leverage for a guy like Simon. With Clyde sitting in jail, Eleanor is absolutely terrified he will make bail, get out, and come back to the house to finish the job. She desperately needs protection.
So we move to Section 7, the escape. Simon basically becomes her bodyguard.
He does. He drives out to her house, packs her a bag, and gets her out of town. He takes her to this secluded lake resort near the Maryland state line. He sets up a full-blown safe house operation.
There's a specific detail about the drive up to the lake that I found so funny but also so telling about their dynamic. Eleanor insists on driving.
Oh, the driving scene is fantastic.
Yeah.
She absolutely insists on driving her giant 15-year-old Lincoln Town car. And she drives it terribly. She's straddling the lane dividers, ignoring people honking at her, driving 10 miles under the speed limit on the highway.
Terrifying for anyone else in the car.
Truly. It really reinforces her frailty. She's physically very vulnerable, but it also highlights Simon's extreme patience, or rather his extreme desperation. He is white-knuckling it, enduring this terrifying car ride simply because she is his golden goose.
Yeah.
He's gripping the door handle, praying they don't get T-boned at an intersection, because if she dies in a car wreck right now before the assets are secured, his entire master plan might completely unravel.
And while they are in the car trying to escape, the cell phone rings. It's Wally.
This is such a high-tension moment.
Yeah.
Wally is literally calling Eleanor from his hospital bed. He's just been severely beaten. His face is bandaged up. He wants sympathy from his client, sure, but he also wants to check in on her. He smells a rat. He knows Clyde was looking for the will, and he wants to know exactly where Eleanor is and who she's talking to.
And Simon is sitting right next to her, coaching her through the call.
He's leaning over, whispering furiously to her while she's driving. He tells her to play dumb. He's saying, "Don't tell him anything. Do not tell him about the new will we just signed. Just get off the phone as fast as you can."
Right. Simon is actively real-time managing the deception now. He is harboring a client across state lines, hiding her from her violent family, hiding her from her suspicious former lawyer, and essentially just waiting.
Waiting for what exactly?
Well, waiting for nature to take its course.
That is incredibly dark.
It is dark, but it is the stark reality of the situation he's engineered. Think about it. Simon has done all the prep work. The new will is signed and witnessed. The foundation is legally set up. The rival lawyer is neutralized, literally beaten out of commission. The dangerous stepson is locked in a cage. Now, Simon literally just needs Eleanor to pass on so he can file the paperwork and take control of the $20 million.
Wow. So let's summarize the status quo as we head toward the end of our analysis, because there are a lot of moving parts. First, Simon has the executed will in his safe, but he has absolutely no money yet. He's still dead broke. He's still sleeping on a cot in the closet.
Correct. He is asset rich on paper, or at least legally positioned to be, but completely cash poor in reality. He still owes Chubb the bookie $7,000, and bookies don't care about future probate expectations.
Right. And Clyde is currently in jail, but he's incredibly dangerous and very angry. He will eventually make bail or serve his short time and get out.
And when he does, he knows there is money out there somewhere. He's not going to just walk away and get a job at the hardware store.
No, he won't. Meanwhile, Wally is beaten up and humiliated, but he's a lawyer. He's suspicious. He knows something is fundamentally wrong with this picture, and he knows Simon Latch is somehow involved.
And underneath all of this, Simon's personal life is still actively imploding. The divorce is moving forward. The gambling debt is likely growing because of the stress. He is walking a very thin tightrope over a very deep canyon.
And that brings us to the final question. The provocative thought that just keeps nagging at me as I review all these sources. We have spent this entire deep dive analyzing Simon's clever moves, Wally's blatant greed, Clyde's explosive violence. But what about Nettie?
That is the pivot point, isn't it? Is Eleanor Nettie Barnett really just a victim here? Is she just a confused, helpless old lady being passed back and forth between predatory small-town lawyers? Or is she actually the one completely in control of the board?
Think about the facts we have. Since walking into Simon's office, she has gotten multiple free, expensive lunches. She has a personal chauffeur driving her around. She has completely free, dedicated legal protection. She has a young, energetic lawyer at her absolute beck and call 24/7. She has been whisked away to a beautiful lake resort, all expenses paid, to be kept safe from her terrifying stepson. And all of this, exactly. He has seen 0 bank statements. He has seen 0 original stock certificates. He has only the verbal word of an eccentric elderly woman and 1 vague phone call from a mysterious wealth manager in Atlanta named Buddy Brown, who just said she was well taken care of, which could mean anything. It could mean she has $50,000 in a checking account.
It raises such a provocative thought for the listener to take away from this. In the classic game of conning the con man, is it at all possible that this unassuming, church-going widow is actually playing the longest, most brilliant game of all?
It is a massive possibility that we simply cannot ignore. Because if that $20 million doesn't actually exist, if it was the delusion or manipulation, then Simon Latch has permanently destroyed his professional ethics, he's alienated his peers, he's risked his physical safety with Clyde, and he's completely blown up whatever was left of his life, all for an absolute phantom.
It's a fascinating place to leave the analysis. It is the ultimate gamble for a guy who is a crippling gambling addict. He thinks he's finally betting on a sure thing, a guaranteed payout, but he hasn't even seen the cards he's betting on.
Absolutely. The house doesn't always win, but sometimes the player doesn't even realize what game they're actually playing until it's way too late.
Perfectly said. Thanks for joining us as we unpacked this incredible story. You have plenty to think about with Nettie and Simon. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.